and turns blazing fuel into grimy cinders, then what wonderful properties do we find in charcoal, which is so brittle that a light tap breaks it, and a slight pressure pulverizes it, and yet is so strong that no moisture rots it, nor any time causes it to decay." Such aspects of things as these, their naturalness and unnaturalness, the sympathies and antipathies of their superficial qualities, their eccentricities, their brightness and strength and destructiveness, were inevitably the ways in which they originally fastened our attention. If you open early medical books, you will find sympathetic magic invoked on every page. Take, for example, the famous vulnerary ointment attributed to Paracelsus. For this there were a variety of receipts, including usually human fat, the fat of either a bull, a wild boar, or a bear, powdered earthworms, the usnea or mossy growth on the weathered skull of a hanged criminal, and other materials equally unpleasant, the whole prepared under the planet Venus if possible, but never under Mars or Saturn. Then, if a splinter of wood, dipped in the patient's blood, or the blood-stained weapon that wounded him, be immersed in this ointment, the wound itself being tightly bound up, the latter infallibly gets well. I quote now von Helmont's account. Quote, "For the blood on the weapon or splinter, containing in it the spirit of the wounded man, is roused to active excitement by the contact of the ointment, whence there results to it a full commission or power to cure its cousin german, the blood in the patient's body. This it does by sucking out the dolorous and exotic impression from the wounded part. But to do this it has to implore the aid of the bull's fat and other portions of the unguent. The reason why the bull's fat is so powerful is that the bull, at the time of slaughter, is full of secret reluctancy and vindictive murmurs, and therefore dies with a higher flame of revenge about him than any other animal." And thus we have made it out, says this author, that the admirable efficacy of the ointment ought to be imputed not to any auxiliary concurrence of Satan, but simply to the energy of the posthumous character of revenge remaining firmly impressed upon the blood and concreted fat in the unguent. The author goes on to prove by the analogy of many other natural facts that this sympathetic action between things at a distance is the true rationale of the case. He says, quote, "If the heart of a horse slain by a witch, taken out of the yet reeking carcass, be impaled upon an arrow and roasted, immediately the whole witch becomes tormented with the insufferable pains and cruelty of the fire, which could by no means happen unless there preceded a conjunction of the spirit of the witch with the spirit of the horse. In the reeking and yet panting heart, the spirit of the witch is kept captive, and the retreat of it prevented by the arrow transfixed. Similarly, hath not many a murdered carcass at the coroner's inquest suffered a fresh hemorrhage or cruentation at the presence of the assassin? The blood being, as in a furious fit of anger, enraged and agitated by the impress of revenge conceived against the murderer, at the instant of the soul's compulsive exile from the body. So, if you have dropsy, gout, or jaundice, by including some of your warm blood in the shell and white of an egg, which, exposed to a gentle heat and mixed with a bait of flesh, you shall give to a hungry dog or hog, the disease shall instantly pass from you into the animal and leave you entirely. And similarly again, if you burn some of the milk either of a cow or of a woman, the gland from which it issued will dry up. A gentleman at Brussels had his nose mowed off in a combat, and the celebrated surgeon Tagliacozzus digged a new nose for him out of the skin of the arm of a porter at Bologna. About 13 months after his return to his own country, the engrafted nose grew cold, putrefied, and in a few days dropped off, and it was then discovered that the porter had expired near about the same punctilio of time. There are still at Brussels eye-witnesses of this occurrence. Van Helmont then adds, "I pray, what is there in this of superstition or of exalted imagination?" Modern mind-cure literature, the works of Prentice Mulford, for example, is full of sympathetic magic. How indeed could it be otherwise? The extraordinary value for explanation and prevision of those mathematical and mechanical modes of conception which science uses was a result that could not possibly have been expected in advance. Weight, movement, velocity, direction, position. What thin, pallid, uninteresting ideas! How could the richer animistic aspects of nature, the peculiarities and oddities that make phenomena picturesquely striking or expressive, fail to have been first singled out and followed by philosophy as the more promising avenue to the knowledge of nature's life? Well, it is still in these richer, animistic, and dramatic aspects that religion delights to dwell. It is the terror and beauty of phenomena, the promise of the dawn and of the rainbow, the voice of the thunder, the gentleness of the summer rain, the sublimity of the stars, and not the physical laws which these things follow, by which the religious mind still continues to be most impressed. And just as of yore the devout man tells you that in the solitude of his room or of the field he still feels the divine presence, that inflowings of help come in reply to his prayers, and that sacrifices to this unseen reality fill him with security and peace. Pure anachronism, says the survival theory, anachronism for which de-anthropomorphization of the imagination is the remedy required. The less we mix the private with the cosmic, the more we dwell in universal and impersonal terms, the truer heirs of science we become. End of Lecture 20, Part 1.